everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Sarah Christensen with One Sage's View Astrology, and today I'm going to be diving into the astrology for Nicola Coughlan in 2026. We're going to be looking at several charts to kind of take a look at the end of 2025, just since she's been doing this play recently, and we're going to look at the details on that particular piece of work that she's doing and when that launched, and to look at the astrology of that. But also, because she recently had a birthday on January 9th, we'll take a look at her solar return. And additionally, we'll look at the charts for the project of Bridgerton, both the part 1 and the part 2. And also, I think I have a chart for the premiere that's happening in Paris today. I'm recording this on January 14th. So I'm finally settled into Dublin and I'm working on getting some new videos going for you. So let's dive into it and look at the astrology for Nicola in the coming year and what it has to offer, insights, and hopefully you learn something new in this detail on diving into her charts. The whole point of me sharing these videos is to enjoy the actor and their work, the characters that they may play, and the meaning of some of the symbolism so you can learn along the way. I encourage you to keep a notebook if there's something that you're learning. We'll dive into Venus a lot also in this video because of the annual perfection that Nicola is in 2026. From her birthday. From her birthday on January 9th, she turned 39, and that brings her annual perfection to her 4th house, and her 4th house in the whole sign system is Taurus. And so Venus is a very important planet, and there are several things happening to Venus in her chart natally, but also through the transits this year, because Venus does have a retrograde later this year in 2026 in the sign of Scorpio and Libra. So this is going to be a really significant year for a lot of things as it pertains to 4th house matters. And because Nicola's Venus is in the top of her chart and so close to her midheaven, that's going to reflect in the relationship with friends as it ties in between the 4th house and the public persona. So she's going to be out in the world because of her work, and that's going to be visible. So if there's anything going on with family includes her mother, her siblings, and these ties in her life, but also her own home. If she's doing something brand new in her own home, maybe she's upgrading her home or something like that, that's going to reflect in the astrology. So we are going on some assumptions. We only have her rising sign. We do not have an exact birth time. So the solar return chart especially is going to be an estimate. It is not going to be 100% accurate. I want to make sure I make note of that. So let's get into the astrology and do some exploring. So let's go. All right, we're going to take a look at Nicola Coughlan's astrology for 2026, but I'm going to touch into the start time for the play that she's doing right now. It started on December 4th in 2025, and it runs in production all the way until February 28th. But when we're taking a look at the charts, we wanted to take a look at the beginning of that play, just to kind of get a snapshot of what she might be experiencing in the planetary transits during from that initiation of that particular play and part that she's playing. It is an Irish play, I do know that. The playwright, I think that was original creation of that play was from 1907, and so it's something that ties very much into her Irish roots. So let's take a look at the chart for that particular production that she's in and the part that she's playing. And in December and through up until her birthday on January 9th, she would have been in a 3rd house annual perfection, and that means that Mars was pretty significant up until her birthday. Then it shifts into Venus when she goes into a 4th house annual perfection. So what we're looking at for a period of time is the Mars and then also the Venus. So during this production, it kind of shifts between Mars being the prominent planet for her in the annual perfection as Lord of the Year until her birthday, and then on her birthday it switched over to Venus. And so this is very important play for her, and that it highlights her own Venus had just had a return, and so it's kind of highlighting her midheaven and the part that she plays. Now, I haven't done a lot of research into that particular part and what's it about or anything like that. It's just that she is going to be in the public and having a presence with that production. I did read a little bit of piece of information about it, and that it has been getting good reviews, though she did have challenges with coming down with a bug recently, and that kind of slowed down her engagement with the public, which is interesting because that would be, how Mars might come in and give an upset on the situation. And so you can see Mars here at the beginning of that production was going to come over her own personal Uranus in Sagittarius. So at the date of the release in the very first show, December 4th, that Mars was approaching that, and probably within a couple of days or within that first week is probably when she might have come down with, her immune system being challenged, because the Mars is kind of hitting on that Uranus and kind of giving an upset to something. And it's also that Mars would have squared off from the Sagittarius energy by transit and squaring off on her Jupiter, and then moving to square off with the planet of Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. So that is an important production for her, absolutely, in what she wants to do. And it's a live performance. So it's very important to have, be fresh and not struggling with some kind of bug, but, performers who, they work through the best they can on some issues when they get sick, but that would be the challenge that would present during that production for her. And indeed, that's what did unfold for her. Other things I think are important is just it kind of is, she emerged into her birthday. We're looking at the switch up of energy. Now, with the Venus turning into the Lord of the Year on her birthday, January 9th, then we're seeing something that shifts. And it may have been that she might have struggled with some of her voice or her vocal cords for a stage production, a theater production. And that would be important here because it does shift the energy. But it's probably, she's on the mend by then, by her birthday, and that she would be working through, now the energy has shifted and it's the Venus. But the Venus still has an energy that is facing off with an opposition to Uranus. Now, this is out of sign, but Venus at 1 degree 54 minutes in her chart is going to be receiving the unexpected energy in 2026 of Uranus when it goes into Gemini. Now, I'll go into detail on those exact dates, but it can still cause some problems for her in this production, but I would think that is more related to the Mars energy being challenged in multiple ways. You have Mars coming to her Uranus energy, so activating something there, so it's very public. And then also her energy is getting tapped because Mars in Aries has strong presence in its energy, but it's being challenged in a way by the Saturn and the Neptune. The Neptune is very close to her Mars. And so if her immune system is struggling maybe to recover in a quicker fashion, then that is part of that planetary transit that's happening kind of in two forms. Mars hitting the Uranus, squaring up on the Saturn and Neptune that are in transit, but also that the Neptune and the Saturn very close by is still challenging the Mars energy, in the natal chart. So that has an impact on her career house, which is the 10th house of Scorpio, because that's Mars, right? And then also fire energy, like that can be the how she deals with the public, her fans or whatnot. So she probably cut herself off. That would be a Mars action, like I'm cutting myself off from being able to meet with my fans. And, and I know that she does like to do that. So that would be something that she, had to make a serious choice and a decision based on trying to keep her immunity up. Because when you meet with the public, you always have that potential of coming into contact, especially during the winter season, with difficult, flu and cold season. And that can be challenging for a performer. So that's an interesting thing to think about for that chart because of that it was a production that is going through the end of February, and she has multiple things that are coming in February. We have the January 29th Bridgerton. I'll be talking about that in a minute. But then she has another, I think it's an animation movie that she's played a part in that releases in February 13th, I believe, unless they've moved the date. I think it's called Goat or something like that. So this is an interesting period of time going into age 39 upon her birthday. So let's move on from this. You can see the challenges that putting on that performance definitely met some challenges with the health. And we have Jupiter also going through her sixth house of health or not health. This is challenging to the health. And that Jupiter, and the Jupiter is facing off in opposition to her own sun. So when Jupiter is going through the sixth house, we can be managing through something that's health related. And so that's important to kind of take note. Okay, or that we're trying to do a daily to take care of our health in some way through our nutrition or something like that. So let me just back up on this real quick. So onward to the next slide. So the solar return for Nicola came around January 9th, was when she was born, but I believe this solar return happened for her on January 8th, probably in the evening time, at the nighttime. So now we have an estimate. Remember, this is an estimated chart because we don't have the exact time. It's sometime within the window of about an hour, hour and a half, because she noted that she is an Aquarius rising. That's the information we have so far. So solar returns like to be exact when the sun returns to this exact moment. So it could be at January 9th. But if me putting the detail up on the ascendant at 0 degrees of Aquarius, just to kind of get it in the frame of the shape of the chart, there is a period of time of about 1.5, 2 hours of the ascendant, the first house being an Aquarius, and that would give us an ascendant of Aquarius as a rising sign. So what's important about this particular solar return is a couple of things. I did do it from Galway. Her birth time is sometime after 9:29 a.m. and that gives us the rising sign being an Aquarius because we do know that. But the rising sign will click over for about 2 hours, but this could be like an hour and a half because of the time of year that it is. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. But I do believe, based on the information we have from her peaking a lot with the season 3 material, that her rising sign is somewhere in the first 3 to 4 degrees of Aquarius. So I would put it there. And that gives a lot of detail with the Pluto coming into Aquarius and conjoining her ascendant degree. So I really believe it's in the first couple of degrees. So want to point that out. And that's an ongoing long-term transit, and it's very transformational about the identity of the self. And what we want to take a look at also is, I pointed out some things here with the arrows I have on that the solar return, I look for patterns in the solar return that's going to give us insights into the most important planetary transits that are kind of at the snapshot of the solar return, because that solar return energy can bring a vibration, a resonance through the entire year until her next birthday. So there's two things I look at when we approach the solar return. We're looking at the solar return in itself with the natal chart at the base. And of course, we have an estimate here. We don't have, so we're getting close. It's not 100% accurate. Okay. It is very close though. And so the things that would move based on an accuracy of the birth time is probably the ascendant, slightly the moon, and the midheaven. Okay. Those are the three that have a higher variability to them than anything else. And of course, the lot of fortune because of how it's calculated. So this thing right here. And so what I want to point out is one of the biggest things that's showing up in her solar return is the moon. So we could have this moon in a kind of in a few degrees where it might land in that solar return opposite the Saturn and the Neptune in Pisces opposite the moon in Virgo. So because that moon could be in Libra, because if she's born later, that could put the moon a little bit later. But I think for it to click over into Libra, then we're far beyond kind of those first few degrees of Aquarius rising So those 0 to say 3-4 degrees of Aquarius. So I do believe it is in Virgo. So it gives an intensity to her awareness of the archetype of the mother, or a nurturing figure, a woman figure in the life. There is a lot of energy that is being pulled in a context of separation or a pull away. That moon is in the eighth house, in her eighth house. And so there's a potential for an awareness around the feeling of being in exile or the feeling of criticism. And so these things can ring more loudly in a person's experience, but it's in the eighth house. And so when it's in the eighth house, when I see that there, I kind of wonder about how criticism is absorbed, or it pulls her further away from her sense of self-worth. Is there, or if it's not that, if she's feeling confident in her identity as it is in this particular year, or what things she's getting in her work, and then how that then translates into what she desires in her private life. These are things that are important here. That moon is very important because it also reminds me that come her birthday, she's in an annual perfection of the fourth house. She's 39 years old. So it's the fourth house, because when you're 36, it's the first, 37, 38, 39. So 39, age 39, we're at the fourth house. Fourth house is matters very much below the surface, and the family, her original family, because I don't think she's created her own family yet. I mean, she has a relationship, a long-term relationship, but that's not something that her own personal space, her own home, apartment, whatever she has created for herself in her home, that will also be part of something that she's focusing on in that space. So that translation of symbolism can go through several layers. So it can be an actual thing about her family, an actual thing about criticism, and also the criticism can return to her body image, or the body image that she may do something within her body image, and then that receives some kind of criticism. So there's a potential that returns, but there's a separation of energy there. There's a very challenging thing that she has to work out based on how she picks up that energy, right? So I would imagine most actors will face that kind of scrutiny. And anytime you're putting out, production things that you've participating in with, other cast ensembles, there's that stress with kind of molding your work, and you put it out there and it may do well, and sometimes it might receive harsh criticism based on what someone's expectation is. So that can be challenging, because that's an opposition, and when you have your moon opposite an outer planet like Neptune, there is a challenge with the emotional sense of self in some way, right? So you're working with that energy. Because of the amount of work that she's putting out, it's going to put her out in the public more, but she also may exile herself in some way, because that moon is in the eighth house. It's kind of a little bit behind the scenes, okay? I think also in the transit of her solar return, we have this huge stellium of Capricorn sitting in her 12th house. So that is the other prominent feature of this solar return, is all of that energy. And that's a stack up of planets that's pretty rare to have. Mars, the Mercury, Sun, Mars, and Venus, all, and them all stacking up so closely at the same time. That is very unique combination. So this is sitting in her unconscious mind. There's something that's being worked out for, maybe in a long-term sense, like some piece of work that she's doing or that she's invited to do, or this is something that she takes in from everything that she's doing in the year that shapes something about her work, because that's Capricorn. That's something that is shaped in her idea about what she's getting out of the work. What's her own growth and evolution from the work, but it's in the unconscious mind. So, and that also to me indicates that she may do some things behind the scenes that are done in 2026, sometime during this year, that won't emerge until next year, because it will move again. But because of the stack up, she's always going to have that sun returning into her 12th house. It's kind of something gets highlighted in her unconscious mind. But it also can be, a transformation in the identity that has other parts of it that are important for her sense of the inner world that has the masculine and the inner world that's feminine and enduring, because you have Mars in Capricorn is very strategic and very enduring, and the Venus in Capricorn is also very strong in that it's like a stoic. I always look at Venus in Capricorn like it's a stoic queen. It holds its feminine energy more, and it's more controlled. So there will be that controlled sense of identity and self. So she will want to pull back and pull behind the scenes more. Okay? Though the work will call her out on occasion, and so she will show up to do that because she does have the Venus in Sagittarius. But what also is important in this particular year is this right here in her chart. Now, I don't think, because we don't have an exact birth time, her midheaven of the solar return may be, 0 degrees of Gemini, but it could be, a couple degrees off of that as well because of maybe a more exact birth time. But that Uranus, which is an outer planet, it will be landing into Gemini and staying there for the next 6 years or whatever. And that will be pushing on that opposition with the Venus up here. And that to me is a multifaceted, important thing about this particular year. It's like something can be surprising that emerges for her, very surprising, and affect her home. So it kind of makes me wonder if something creative picks up and allows her maybe more money, more access to parts. I know that she signed with that big agency last year, so she has more coming her way in maybe bigger parts and bigger roles. But it might be that she is permitted to work, have a bigger home base, like what she's doing in her own home. I have not seen any news stories on this, so if you see any news stories on perhaps she is buying property because her opportunities are increasing her wealth, and that could be something that comes in this year that she gives to herself through what she's been able to earn and anticipated projects coming in the future. She may make that determination of doing that. Another thing about that Venus receiving the opposition of the Uranus energy in Gemini is there can be surprising roles that elevate some more things about her visible persona. We know that the Faraway Tree is coming out. That will be very active for children, but that comes out, I believe, like the end of March. I do believe I might have a chart for that. And that, I think, is March 27th. But Uranus doesn't reach the opposition to her Venus until I think it's May 28th. That is going to be a profound time period. So whatever films that she's had out, The Faraway Tree, there's another one called The Goat, these different. So she may, but I think that can be also something related to her family and possibly her sister and or mother. So there can be kind of those surprise sudden events that can emerge around that time of year because of that being an opposition, the Uranus opposition to her Venus. Okay. And Venus being very important as it pertains to the rulership of her 4th house, but it's also the rulership of her 9th house. So anything that Venus is responsible for, and also the aspects within the natal chart, because her Venus does trine her Mars, and Mars is going to receive energy from Saturn and Neptune coming into Aries. That's happening January 26th for the Neptune moving in. And then Saturn moves in on February 13th. And I believe that that's close to the release date that's showing online for that animation that she's participating in. It's called The Goat or something like that. And I think that's important to kind of keep in mind because that will amplify her being out in the public eye, though she might have the feeling that she wants to pull back a bit because of something that's going on in the work that has to be done behind the scenes. It's kind of twofold. She has to do the press, the the press junket and all of that for each of the things that she's launching, right? So that's important. But the moon is in an opposition in the solar return with Saturn and Neptune. So the frenzy can kick back up. Of course, we know this, but isn't it interesting on the timing of when things turn on and how many episodes she's actually in for season 4? I'm not sure when they're going to start the filming for season 5, but there's this pull in criticism, and she's going to be working through some of that at this year. Also in the solar return, we can see the south node and the ascendant approximation of her solar return. And what that means for her is that she will have things that she needs to let go of and release, but it may be difficult if she's still working through some types of criticism or these kinds of things that she might have had early on in her career. If the topics of things that she faced in the past come up again, that's an indication of something that she's working on to release it, okay? Which would be other people's values that she's observing and what she's learning about what she needs to let go of in understanding that. The observation of what her values are and how important those are versus other values. So because she's an advocate for causes and she's very vocal about that, and it's very important for that at this time, it could be something that she's also having to address, and it's very important for her and her values. That's her second house values. But it is that south node is sometimes we can get caught up in things, but we have to release that, okay, we're not always going to agree with someone, but we're still having to face the feeling that can come when someone who criticize our work or our stance on something, like human rights or something like that. We're definitely in a fragile period of time in history that a lot of conflict is right there. And so if she's more vocal, she may come up against criticism. Okay, what else? During the year, we also have the movement of the Jupiter through Cancer, but it will be going into Leo later in the year. And that's important because then that will be when the Jupiter goes into Leo, it will have an opposition with the Pluto and her rising sign. So that will be a accentuation to someone else in her life, the partner in the life, significant other in the life. But there's a transformation for her because the Pluto is still in the first house. And when Jupiter goes to accentuate the seventh house person is really highlighted. But there's a challenge that's a very strong challenge to the ego and also the identity with that other person. So what does that mean? People are going to ask about that one. So that one can be when Jupiter does move into Leo. Let me look at my notes here, the exact date. Jupiter goes into Leo on June 30th. And then that is a face-off against the opposition with Pluto in transit. And what does that mean? That means the mirror, but who is she working with in June? Or what person is she identifying with the partner in June, late June, in July, in August, these kind of timelines, because that is going to be a period of time where it's very activated in terms of the mirror. And what happens when that mirror is activated, it can show up for the other person in what they're receiving in the feedback loop with her and her work and her friends. So it can tie in all of those things because the Jupiter is facing off with it can be highlighting the partner, and the ego of the partner can be expanded. And then it's the transformation that's going on with her and her friend group, because that is her own individual self and what she's doing in her work, and then how that transforms. So there's kind of this thing that's unlocking as it pertains to her partner this year, but it's when the time period is when Jupiter goes into Leo. Okay, let's see here. That is very important. But the main thing that we're looking at are multiple outer planet movements between the Uranus opposite. Well, the first one is Neptune into Aries, Saturn into Aries. Then, you have the constant of the Pluto in the first house, still kind of activating the sense of identity being transformed in a big way. That Pluto is also putting a pressure that it's building towards the square that everybody experiences for that period of time. That Pluto square in life is a very transformation, difficult time. So, but that'll be a couple years before it gets up to about 9 degrees of Aquarius. Right now, it is more that it is on the ascendant angle, I believe. And now when Jupiter comes up, there'll be the opposition in the mirror detail. What does that also mean? That she might have to communicate more clearly, or she's communicating more directly about something. If there's fan behavior that she disagrees with or has received criticism for, she may speak out. If she speaks out, does it help her or hinder her in some way? Because the Neptune makes it a challenge. The Saturn on her Mars makes it a challenge to put out strong communication, if that makes sense. There's a responsibility that she must take heed to have a responsible frame for it. So likely if there's some kind of thing that she's dealing with, she might need, I guess it's called PR training, where she gets extra support in how she might position or language something based on something happening. So if something is happening related to that Uranus opposition, or something has happened to perception. Remember when I told you that the perception that people in the collective, and especially the fandom, have locked in on, the bottom can fall out when the Saturn and the Neptune come into Aries all the way. So you head into the Bridgerton Part 1 with the Saturn and the Neptune. And then as individuals, of course, are behind, there's so much going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to, right? But the idea that's been projected can fall or take new shape. And with that can come criticism again. There might be a difficulty with just kind of what I call the ego, having the inflation from last year, 2024, all of the experiences of that. But then based on new opportunities that have come your way, you might think as an actor that you're not as vulnerable as you once were, but one slip of a moment can make it feel like you're on shaky ground. So she has to be very careful in what she says, because the perception can be changed dramatically rather quickly depending on what is going on in her local environment. I think she needs to be very, very careful traveling, and because of what's going on in a particular immediate environment around her. So, and the reason I say that is when those planets, Neptune and Saturn, go into her third house, they are adding energy to her Mars. Sometimes Mars is projected out onto other people, and then it can be challenging to navigate that energy. Now, it can be that she's just experiencing that wild and raw instinctual energy based on something that she's doing in a production. That can totally play that way. But there can be the unexpected person that shows up from fan or whatnot, or a stranger, who knows? I mean, you never know these days that people need to be aware of their environment and who's in their environment. So, that's a part of the equation of being someone who's in the public eye, and that kind of, who has access, how much access, and these kinds of things. So there's that to be taking note of as well. So I think that's important to point out for this year. So again, this is the solar return. We're getting a sense of some of the energies that are being navigated in this year. And because there are so many outer planets making direct hits as oppositions to the solar return moon, the Uranus to the Venus, Neptune and Saturn and to her Mars, these are all very, very important transits and solar return energy that is with her the entire year. So very transformational for her. Home will feel like the sanctuary, but she will have things emerge from her home environment, or maybe she's changing, maybe she's moving, and this is a part of that. And also it can be related to a female family member, that things can happen and she's adjusting to that. And so that's going to be something that's behind the scenes, but it can leak into the public. So that's important to point out as well. The fire energy and the fire elements and air elements are the easier for her to work with because of her midheaven being in Sagittarius, that's fire energy, and her rising sign being air, and those two work, and they actually kind of really give a lot of energy in together. And so the movement from the water into the sign of Aries for Neptune and Saturn actually is supporting a shift of the paradigm for her, and she will be able to leverage that energy in a big way for her Venus. So there can be a lift off as well. And if you think about all the projects that she has landing in 2026 and that she might be doing the production on, before it hits post-production, this makes 2026 a really significant year. But I think from the creative will get really interesting even into next year, because I think she may start taking on more challenging projects as she looks into, the future. And so, but it's kind of like the home base is kind of going through a lot of adjustment this year. So this is hopefully valuable to understand just some things about the planetary positions in someone's solar return and how that looks, how you can look at that with the natal chart. Okay. And also understanding the power of the opposition and power of the square energy. Those are the challenging things that are conjunctions and oppositions, and squares are the things that are harder to work with or navigate because of how much energy is getting pulled, where you're having to bounce between the two energies. But when an outer planet is involved to one of your personal planets, like her Venus and her Mars, these are really, really, really significant in terms of what is required to transform her expression of that energy. It's going through a paradigm change. So there are significant changes on the horizon for Nicola in that regard. Okay. So that is the solar return. If you have any questions, please share them in the comments. I really enjoy reading your comments and, offering some insights that may come after, while you're watching this video or after. It's always helpful to share that so other people have them as well. All right, let's jump into the next thing that we want to take a look at. And that is, today is January 14th when I'm recording this. It's going to be a couple days into editing before it actually is launched on my channel. And today, I don't remember what time, I think it was 5:30 p.m. in Paris, France. We have them, they're having the Netflix Premiere. So we're a couple hours from that because I'm in Dublin, so that's only a couple hours away. So this is a look at that chart that's coming up later today. And so we see in this particular chart, I need to grab my annotation here. So we're still in with the sun in Capricorn here in January, and we have a moon in Sagittarius, and which is interesting because to me, when you have the moon in Sagittarius, you have a lot of excitement around the globe. And so that is something that is definitely a part of this. And we also have in this moment, well, looky here, midheaven of that chart for Paris is landing very close to her Mars. And I think this is important because it speaks to something uniquely individual for what might have been pre-recorded and then released during this time, that she highlights something about her individual self and what she's communicating in this production. There'll be the heightened awareness of how her character Penelope, now Bridgerton, and what her individuality in the show will appear in this new part of the story arc. That will be part of that. And I kind of wonder about the potential for leaks because the midheaven is close to the Mars and you have Neptune very close by. So there could be the challenge of some leaks. And then that energy, also the Mars, here's Mars. I kind of look at Mars two ways. You look at Mars from the personal, but then you look at Mars in transiting, and the Mars in transiting is opposite the Jupiter. So that's very unique, and what it might stimulate from her energy. Well, it could be like what is being stimulated in the unconscious mind of Nicola, but also then the Jupiter in Cancer, and that is relating to the moon of the moment, but also what she's in service to. So there might be an appearance of something else that in her social activism that she's doing that can appear, and that could create some tension. Where does that go now? Because she was supporting Gaza before. Now maybe it's still there, or maybe it's shifting. Maybe there's another shift because there's so many other things that are unfolding. So where does she pick up on that social activism? Because that's what she's in service to. But I also think there's a lot going on in her watching her health. To me, this is also kind of what is going on in watching her health. So she may be working through today and the energy if she's having to appear live somewhere, but a lot of that might have been pre-recorded. I don't know how much is on the red carpet. There probably is a red carpet, but I think that's also recorded things. So there's that. What else is important? Venus is in Capricorn and 26 degrees of Capricorn, and it's still under the beams of the sun. So there is a reserved nature that the feminine part will be reserved more. It will be behind the scenes more. The Mars energy will be a little bit more open because of where the midheaven of the moment is landing. So whatever shows up in the premiere in energy about her individual self or her free will choices or her instinct. Instinct is a good word for Aries. How that is showing up in how she is operating either on the red carpet or in regard to how she communicates something very directly. So that's important. But this is a period of time between the premiere and the actual launch of the show, the release of the show from Netflix out, I think, January 29th for that first part. And that's important because I think they only get one episode when they go to this premiere. But there can be things that are shared on YouTube that highlight this tension between the Mars in the Capricorn opposite the Jupiter in her sixth house. And her sixth house is if she's appearing on the red carpet, but I don't know how she's appearing on the red carpet if she's in the production of that play. So there can be a conflict, and that can possibly affect her in-person time in Paris versus being in London. So that's important. And today is the 14th, which is, I believe her shows are on Thursdays and another day. So it may be that she goes to something on the premiere and then is back in London, if that's possible, because of being close together in terms of the cities. But I don't know the feasibility of that. So the premiere in Paris kind of points out Aries is at the top of the chart. So something very unique and pioneering is happening in this particular premiere. And there's also the thread of how that is on her chart. There's really a lot of highlight to her career because Mars is her 10th house ruler because Scorpio is at the top of her chart. Yes. So what she says, how she appears, what people, all of that. So very much is indicated in that chart. What else is important here to point out? We also still have let me back up on my little notes here. We also have the energy that is stressing this part of her chart. So she has the Saturn-Uranus 16 and 24 degrees, and this still gets activated at this time. So the Saturn and Neptune in Pisces is still being activated or activating this part of her chart where some things can be surprising that emerge as part of her own individual sense of self and her values of herself. So what she may say and then how that is translated into what she's projecting into the space out with the red carpet, or what is projected out to the world from her own sense of values, her own sense of self. And, they talk about the characters and the character arcs in the storyline, but I know that they were already positioning for Luke Thompson and Yaren Ha. But how much energy will be focused on what's going on with Nicola, what's going on with Luke Newton, and then what's going on with that balance and the energy for the new leads, right? I think there's an interesting juxtaposition of how much energy was activated for Nicola and Luke in 2024, and then how that translates into 2026 in this new season. So it'll be interesting to see. There's also this energy, and this is like surprising things that can happen. This is the surprising thing that can happen. And look at the opposition here. This is a challenging energy. So a lot of fortune receiving the energy from Uranus and Taurus still is unexpected things about the obsession quality between Scorpio and Taurus. And I've spoken about this before, and it is the thing that can happen to us. And sometimes it's medical, sometimes it can be we are dealing with an illness or something like that. But it can be what I call in this, because we have Black Moon Lilith tied into this at the moment of the premiere. So where does that show up in the storyline of the show? It can be that, but Nicola carries it within her chart, in her career house and in her fourth house of home. And this is important in terms of what gets translated out of how the fandom reacts to this new storyline and the feminine energy. So feminine energy, Taurus is feminine energy and body, or feminine energy and beauty standards and these kinds of things. But when you have Black Moon Lilith, you have the dark shadow, you have shadow material as it pertains to the feminine showing up. So is it just showing up in the show material, or is it showing up in something that she has to face off again with what is said and maybe criticisms, these kinds of things, and how she must navigate that? That's a constant in her career because she has Scorpio at the top of her chart. So she will have transformative type of roles where she's challenging feminine archetypes, right? So definitely with the storyline of Penelope, and Penelope emerging, and also with the other part of herself that kind of was always one, but it was two personalities, Penelope that everybody kind of knew in the show, and then the Lady Whistledown part of the character. And now it's merged, but what kind of dynamic do we see in that being translated? So it's kind of the dark feminine shadow appearing in the storyline, but also how does that translate into, is Nicola having to deal with that from a personal, this is my career, and that's what the fandom and the obsession and these kinds of things with the parasocial relationships. This is very strong energy. And when Uranus is hitting the lot of fortune, this is things that can happen to us, and it's kind of fated experiences. So I look at, there's more than one way to see that fate is kind of lining up. That's one of them when you have Uranus on the lot of fortune. But also when you have the vertex and the anti-vertex. If the anti-vertex would be at 6 degrees of Pisces, I look for anything that's, working off that. We do have the South Node approaching. The South Node, as it moves, will move down in the Virgo. So it will come to the vertex. And so that can be a kind of a fated thing that you have a karma situation that you're navigating. So there's that in the energy, but it's not like exacting in the moment. I think this one is more exacting. This tells me that there's maybe another part to the story of that kind of energy, okay? And it's about other people's values or people's criticism in some way. Okay, so if you have any, insights that or questions that you may have from the things that I've shared, please, feel free to make a comment below. I'd like to answer your questions, as you know. What else can I give you from this premiere in Paris? There's a lot going on in the city of Paris itself, and sometimes it's super valuable to look at how your own chart is overlaid into a particular geography, like a city. I don't have that up right now, but that would be something that would be worth exploring at some point, about location and how your chart is at a particular location. That's called locational astrology or astrocartography. So I'm not going to do that right now, but I think it's important that if you have, say, like this kind of opposition in a chart that's happening in a particular moment. This is a very particular moment in Paris, and you have this opposition. So, but how does her natal chart overlay into Paris, right? Like that would be worthwhile to look at the Paris chart and then see how her chart maps into it, right? That's a valuable in the moment of the premiere, because you can see other things, right? Another thing that's also coming out here is Vesta. And it's interesting because I've been getting like the impression in my, I guess, when I ponder things, most recently Vesta has been making its presence more known in my consciousness in the last week. And I don't even remember why it emerged that way. I think it was because I had sat down with my sisters at the full moon, and we were doing some work with sigils, And I was thinking about the power of Vesta at that time in terms of the purification, the flame, the hearth. And also, I was listening to a podcast, I believe, that also discussed Vesta at length. And so I was kind of diving into it. And still, I think it's present, and I'll be studying more or looking at that more in charts. And here it is, I think, close or right on her ascendant in the early degrees of Aquarius. So what this can show up in life, or in a moment, this is in a moment, right? Because this is like an evening premiere, is the purification of the identity. When Vesta comes in, there's something in the intention of the role of the feminine as it's almost like in Aquarius, it has a quality, I think, that is forward looking, forward future, but also for future orientation to it. But Aquarius is also the revolutionary energy, and also how you take the old paradigm and make it new. There's a purification that happens into her identity into something and her participation in something. So by going through some process of what she's doing in her work, there can be a purification on the identity as it's getting reshaped. So for example, what I mean by that is because her Penelope Bridgerton character arc has to kind of make the bridge to this new kind of storyline that she's been revealed, and now the queen knows, and the storyline. Okay, but in the storyline you may have that, but there's also something in the personal life that can be picked up on in the role of being an actor who has to bridge the character and frame the character and how they portray the character, not only in the response, like people pick up on it. So they are the creation of something into the collective energy. So the collective unconscious, or the collective, how the collective picks up on the energy. There's like a purification that's going on as it relates to feminine fire, sexual energy, and the purification of sexual energy. And think about the Roman Empire and the Vestal Virgins, and if you go back further, it goes back further into Greek with, I think it's Hestia, I believe. And so this is something I want to dive into more, because we need to focus a little bit more into the feminine asteroids and what they are offering us. And Ceres is another very important. She's actually a dwarf planet. Her Ceres was upgraded back in 2005 or 6 higher, and Pluto was demoted. So they're kind of on an even playing field between Ceres and Pluto. But it still, I think, carries over that Pluto is very strong as a planet. So Ceres also has a very strong, powerful, feminine archetypal embodiment that's with us. I think it's been upgraded. So, and I think it's great that Demetra George, one of my teachers, and the work that she's been doing with the asteroids is just phenomenal. And I will put some links below about some of the most recent things that she's done that I think are very good for anyone who wants to explore more about the subject material of the asteroids, the feminine archetype. Because that to me is, as we name something, and of course the main ones of the feminine and the rise of the feminine, or the return of the feminine, the balance of the feminine, having that more harmonized. It may feel like we've gone backwards of recent with some things, but I think it's also that it's kind of like the pendulum. When you make progress, it can slip a little bit and then go back up and continue growing and unfolding. So the asteroids are really interesting subject material to explore for that. And that would be your Ceres, which is this sickle-shaped symbol. And then you have Vesta, of course, the Vestal Virgin, and fire and purification. And then here is Pallas Athena, which is a very strong one. It's a strategist, wisdom, these kinds of things. And then you have Black Moon Lilith, and Black Moon Lilith is very much the toxic shadow of the feminine that is looking for healing. Then you have Juno. Juno is the queen of heaven originally, but partnered up with Zeus, became kind of the archetype, then took on the embodiment of being the one pursuing to understand all of the lovers, that Zeus was so the difficult, the wife, the scorned wife, comes into the picture based on the archetypal storylines, right? But there's a lot more we can do with those particular asteroids and understanding the feminine power embedded in each and every one of them and how they are in someone's chart. We definitely see a strong Pallas Athena in Nicola's chart, and I think that's worth exploring deeper. But by transit, in the moment in Paris, Vesta is right near her ascendant, if not right on it. And I think that's super powerful to explore as we go. Maybe there's something in the actual event that gives something around the idea of purity in some way, or the transformation that comes from her character and then how it's carried forward in that now she is a woman as a character who is a wife and has a child, and so she's having a redefinition, but then how does that be embodied by the actor who went through that as well, right? So yes, it is the art, but there is something that translates to the actual human being who is doing the art, in that how that they may embody something new. Okay, I think that is what I wanted to do on that particular event. But it's really interesting to have that stack in Capricorn. Of course, now Nicola is not the lead or a co-lead in terms of like Luke Newton and not Luke Newton, but Luke Thompson and Yaren Ha. She is a part of the cast ensemble, even though she has a very strong primary role being Lady Whistledown, right? So she does have a strong participation in the season. Okay, well, I think that's all I wanted to cover on this particular chart. Again, if you have any questions on this chart, let me know. Let's go to the next one. Okay, looking into the next, we're going to look at part 1 for the Bridgerton series on season 4, and that's going to be released on January 29th. So let's take a look at that. And this is when the collective, now the premiere, there will be so many people participating in that first episode from the premiere, and so there'll be a little buzz around that. Of course, there could be some leaks from that, but again, it's going to come into the collective with all the energy now in Aquarius, and see how that emphasizes Nicola. And then, of course, in response to who her co-star is, that would be Luke over here, and Luke has a lot of Aquarius, so there'll be a huge amplification, even if they have that minor part, because of the stack up of planets at this. Okay, consider that this is season 4. They're releasing in a very different time of year. I think they released in May and June for season 3. So you see the shift in the months. So there's this interesting shift, and the shift goes into the release at the end of January, which is Aquarius, and the Aquarian theme is going to be very much amplified in the show and the season 4. And Aquarian energy is the collective wanting to create balance and equilibrium, and bring those who might be working on different level, not in the upper class. So it's kind of shrinking the hierarchies, right? I hope you understand what I'm saying. You shrink the hierarchies, you bring people into equilibrium in the society. So in Yaren Ha's storyline, she has a chance to be lifted up by the events that are unfolding in the show, right? And of course, it's fiction show, but it's the purpose of that is to show the storyline for Benedict's, Luke Thompson's character, Benedict, having to strive against the rules and go for something that he prefers or what feels is more important to represent who he really is in terms of a partner. So that's the storyline in this one, though there's going to be challenges on both sides, right, for how that's going to play out. Of course, it's fiction, but it's fun to see how the planets actually stack up, and interesting how they stack up in Nicola's chart. Now, I don't have Luke Thompson's chart. I will do as well as we get closer to the premiere. I'll probably be doing that one the next couple days before, not the premiere, but before the release at the end of the month, so that we can see both Luke Thompson. I only have a sunrise chart or a midheaven chart for him, and Yaren Ha. I do not have any idea of their rising signs. So we can do limited things with that. But I think it's interesting that there is an accentuation of the energy, the Aquarian energy, in that release date for part 1. So there'll be a lot of interest in what's going on. And at the same time, at that release, we have the first outer planet movement over to one of Nicola's personal planets, Mars. And so that will amplify something that's going on there, but it won't be fully kicked over until Saturn also goes back into Aries on February 13th. So in the second part, there may be some kind of wrap up in that storyline that accentuates something about the activation of those two planets onto her Mars. I think there can be pieces in the storyline that we can discuss about the archetype and how it's been activated, because there's a quality with Neptune. There's something new and pioneering that's emerging, but it's really like, how is she as an individual? And then how does that show up? What appears in her individual way that she phrases things and makes statements and these kind of things. We're looking at her communication. This is communication. I also think it's important if Nicola has her family members at any of the release premieres anywhere, I'd be curious to see what her sister and her brother, I believe, and how they show up and appear. Mother energy as well, like where's the mother in that? Maybe they're just behind the scenes, but maybe there is some visibility into that because there is such a buzz around who shows up, and people now have awareness of these people because of what happened in season 3. So there'll be people behind the scenes taking note, but they're not going to be maybe as visible to a degree because of who the co-leads are. But we have an interesting set of co-leads because they have a very, very different energy, and there's a very different resonance as relates to them. But the buzz can shift. So they'll be interesting to see. Also in the premiere, or excuse me, in the launch, this is the launch out of Los Gatos, California. This is pertains to the Netflix timing, of course, and that gives the ascendant here. Now, that's for, I think there's something emerging here related to the show because Uranus is coming to that. So there can be something very surprising and shocking that's showing up in this whole production that people might not have figured in. So there might be something very surprising. The only thing I can think of is I wonder if there's something about season 5 that is unfolding in season 4 that people couldn't have planned. They didn't, you know what I mean? Like it's that kind of surprising thing. But this is like activating the Venus in Nicola's chart, but it's kind of tied into something with the ascendant of the moment for Netflix itself, Netflix as a company, right? But that also is trine energy here, and that is easy flow energy. So it may be something tied to the release and how it's received and all those kinds of things, and then how that translates into the creative discussions around Nicola's part in this, because that's 5th house of creativity, and also the buzz about her children in the show that will be a part of this, right? So point that out, which I think also was taking behind the scenes in the fandom to an extraordinary level in 2024, with people thinking that, you know, she might have a child, these kinds of things. I think people need to be careful what they project onto people without facts and understanding the truth of something, right? So, but it's more that I think there was been so much projection that's related to these actors that there can be this dropping of the veil as they shift into the other co-leads, and there can also be shocking things that happen just because of the shift of the co-leads to Luke Thompson and Yaron Ha. But what if there's so much buzz on Nicola and Luke Newton still that hinders something, right? That can happen. So that'll be interesting to see. But there are these kind of unexpected things that can emerge with the outer planets. These outer planets are definitely in the mix still. And this to me is kind of something fated. I don't know what this fated thing is. It kind of makes me wonder about her family members, what's going on with her family. So it's in these charts. It's definitely there. Let's go to the next one. That's Los Gatos. I did another one for London, and what changes in London is just the ascendant is different in the 8 o'clock hour, 8 a.m. versus the midnight hour in LA area. And so with the London perspective, if she's in London, the release on January 29th, that ascendant now is in Aquarius. And so there's just an amplified Aquarian energy. It amplifies her chart in such a big, big way. And so super interesting. Where's the midheaven? The midheaven is here, and midheaven maps also into her own midheaven, and that's amplifying Nicola's energy once again. So she's going to be standing out even if she's not the lead or co-lead, right? So super valuable. I think it's also interesting to see Venus and Mercury stacking in on that release date at 14 degrees of Aquarius. And also when they're so close to, we have the stack up so close, they kind of merge into one. But that is, these planets, all these planets are responsible for different parts of her chart. So it's her career house, that's the Pluto and the Mars amplify this area of her chart. The Vesta is, again, like I said, that sexual energy, purification, the redefinition of the feminine, the power of embodying that part of the individual feminine, the individuated feminine, and that purification energy. The Sun, that's to me kind of like the group ensemble, and the ascendant accentuating that as an angle. And then you have Mercury. Mercury is responsible for Nicola's fifth house of creative and how she might pick up on children energy, which she does in this season. And then the Venus, which is her fourth house of family, but it's translating also into the show, right? But how does her family show up, or are they present during the release at some point somewhere? Or is she sitting with them during the release? Are they sitting with her in London? These kinds of things. So like her mom, her siblings, how they come together for that release and celebrating the work that she's done. Another piece is, I look at kind of like when this releases in January. We also have the midheaven in Sagittarius, and I think that is very important because of the Jupiter in Cancer is still retrograde at the time that it's released, and that is opposite her Mercury and her Sun. And so a lot of behind the scenes material can come out. It kind of acts as expansion of the work, kind of outside of time, right? So they've done all the recording, extra things behind the scenes, and how that emerges, but what people have been anticipating. But that Jupiter in the sixth house can be how it's influencing something else in perception and the emotion and how people feel connected to the show. She's a main character, very, very important character, and how that looks, but it's also how it travels around the globe. This is kind of an interesting combination with the midheaven of the release date from the London standpoint. Those in England, those in United Kingdom, in that area are going to have that midheaven at 10 degrees, unless they're waking up earlier to, well, it won't be out. It'll be out at that moment. So that's when people are going to log into it. So it's kind of that these two are at, it's a thing called aversion. So there's something there's a disconnect going on here. And I kind of wonder about that, how that might show up in the emotional connection to the show. Does it hit the mark, or does it, there was a lot of feedback on season 3. Will that happen again with season 4, and what people think's going to be versus what does show up to be? So, and I kind of wonder how the perception of their favorites, what episodes get watched and rewatched. Do they watch the whole thing, or they only go back to watch certain sections because of their favorite actor or actress, right? So these are all parts of the thing that I think are important. Okay, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover on that one. And let's go to the next chart. We're going to look at part 2 now. Part 2 releases in February. I believe that was February 26th. Oops. Let's go back here. Yeah, February 26th. And I need to type that in here. Okay, so here's the chart for February 26th. Part 2 comes out, and I think I put this one in London, so 8 a.m. time. So as you can see here, we have a little bit of a shift of energy because now Saturn has fully made it into Aries, and so it changes the dynamic in the second part of the show. So we can see right here, now we have Saturn and Neptune on her Mars, not just the Neptune. And we also have now for Nicola, there's a stack up in the Pisces energy. And so it really amplifies imagination and boundaries. And this is the sense of self in terms of like the self-worth from an evolutionary standpoint. So I kind of wonder about how that looks. And the archetype of her as Lady Whistledown / Penelope Bridgerton, and she's now has a family. And this is kind of that importance of family and how she's a part of the family, but then how does she redefine herself in that show? And then what's perceived as a wrap up from that season 4 perspective in her character arc. When that happens on the character arc, how does that get picked up by the perception in how people like perceive Nicola now anew with this new insight for her character arc going up, continuing to grow. But people will project, but then there's going to be like a reality check here. This is a hardcore reality check on, okay, she's playing a part, but where does the fantasy drop? Or is there still so much escapism that people have a hard time accepting the reality of who Nicola Coughlan is off the stage, and not from what she's on screen. Who is she as an actor, playing a part, getting a part, doing a performance, these kinds of things. When does that reality check come in? And then how does that then work through her Venus, which is very important this year because that Uranus is still there. I kind of wonder about parasocial relationships, the fan base and how they're going to perceive both Nicola and Luke Newton from season 3 to season 4 and how that shifts. I think that's one of the biggest things emerging. And there's transformation still going on for Nicola, and people might kind of wonder about how she's shifting in who is in her life, in her private life, her friends, and what other productions she's participating in. The more private Nicola pulls her life, the harder it will be to maybe connect with her like people used to, because she's pulling, as you are aware from recent activities, she's pulling off pictures and things from the past as she reshapes what she wants out there. So that will reshape the image that she's allowing out. Okay. And that's part of the shift. At the part 2, we also have a moon in Cancer. So that's more emotional. I also wonder about in that part 2 launch, this is a difficult energy for Nicola because it's in aversion to her first house. So even though it's emotional, this is like an emotional moon and trying to maybe work through that, but it doesn't always track. Like, let me give you an example. So if something's going on with her own home, family, mother, what's going on with her mother, what's going on with maybe something from her home, that can be emotional, but then she's got to perform for work and do the thing and put on a stoic face. So, but that's a difficult energy to have to navigate during high visibility time, because you can get drained very quickly from exposure to the public in that way. Okay, that's a sensitive period of time. Yes. And here's another big one for the second release is going to amplify this energy here in her chart, because you have the vertex at 4 degrees of Libra, the amplification of fate relationship, and the Mars, natal Mars is is being activated by the anti-vertex, the opposite point, and Saturn and Neptune are also very close to that position. So that's very interesting as well. So I language that symbolism as something can be fated experience when in a relationship, a female relationship or a friend or her own feminine, when she's traveling into a new place, it can actually be something that's amplified when she's traveled to, say, New York or LA. So if she's going somewhere for the launch release of part 2 in February, but she is still, I think, performing that play towards the end of February. So I don't think she's going anywhere. So there could be something that's emerging out of that as well, because there's multiple things that stack up in February for Nicola. And this is one of them. And then, of course, you have her, I think if that animation movie releases in February as well, that could be more behind the scenes that she has to do, more press that she has to do. I don't know. But the play is going to be something that's dominant because she has to be there in person so many days a week until it's done. And so that's good to know as well. But it's also, that energy also acts as a conduit for easy flow between but oftentimes the vertex, we're looking at something that's right on it or right opposite. So I don't know if it's something that you want to even register on the trine energy. So that's important to point out. The midheaven of the second part release is sitting on her Neptune. So there's something about the imagination and there's something about the hierarchy in the storyline, but also maybe what's being revealed from behind the scenes, from the work that she's done, because that's Capricorn, that's the work that she's done, and how it might have framed something as well. But that is energy that is difficult because it's square the Saturn and Neptune. So there's a challenge being presented in how she communicates something. I think the fan base could be more challenging to deal with in the second part when they are coming to what's the conclusion and how that is the perception of something, the expectation of something in the, at the conclusion of looking at how season 4 took the story and her part, right? Okay, I think I've covered everything I want on this chart for now. Let's see what else I have in my charts. I think I did a chart for the Faraway Tree that's coming out. It's going to be released on March 27th. Let's take a look at that real quick. Let us look at some of the key placements here. We can see that Pluto's still in the first house. We still have these 2 planets now on her Mars. And so still activating the individual instinct and her choices. This is something that amplifies her choices and her actions, and so, and then how that shows up in the career, because this is actively activating her ruler of her 10th house of career. So I think Faraway Tree, because it's a movie release, it's going to be amplifying her creativity, but then maybe how she speaks. Remember how Nicola does a lot with the accents and things? I think maybe with the Faraway Tree, we might see more of that and how people might language some of that. That lends also to how people perceive her, but also we still have this going on here. The moon is still, no, this is on 12 noon. That release for the Faraway Tree might not be until like 4, 5, 7 in the afternoon, in the evening. I just did a noon chart. So the ascendant might not be exact. It might be later in the day. So that's important to point out, because it could be that that's a premiere that's released. The release date has it in the ascendant in, say, Libra or something. So that'll be interesting to see when there's the premiere press that comes out, the release press of when they might release it and walk the red carpet for the premiere. When we have that, then I can take a look at that maybe a little closer. But it's good to see that there is a stack up in Aries and there's a stack up in Pisces. So it's really interesting to see this. And we've got the South Node coming right to her vertex. So there's something very fading about this particular experience. So the Faraway Tree has a lot of energy behind it and how it may amplify something in our career. There can still be critic, but because it's children, it's animation, kind of like part animation, CGI, stuff that they probably had to do, acting on green screen to get the creative that they wanted for the particular production. But it's going to be interesting to see how the stack up in the Pisces and the stack up in Aries bring something pioneering to the production. That'll be interesting to see. It can be compared to other animations that were both animation in parts of the movie and also green screen kind of stuff, like new technology that's there. So it'd be interesting to see how that shows up in that particular production. I see these two as part of the work, part of the connection to families. This is connection to families in the work. The Faraway Tree, I saw a book in the bookstore, like a used bookstore where like rare books, and that book was up in the window. I took a picture of it, but I think it's going to be something that it's not as, say, I don't think it's as popular in the United States, because I think it was something that was in the United Kingdom, in the UK. So I'll be curious to see how popular that is received in the United States versus in Europe. So it'll be interesting to see that. And this is interesting to see the vertex of the noon chart. In the noon chart, this accentuates this part of Nicola's. It's her. There we go. So you can see the vertex, Saturn at 16 in Sagittarius. This is all lining up onto her Chiron. That's an interesting combination. And then you have that energy is also squared up to anything that's in the Pisces, which is her Jupiter. And this pile of planets in Pisces activates that as well. So there's kind of like this T-square energy of how her sense of self-worth from her value that she brings to the production in the Faraway Tree, and that's definitely language there. She has some challenge with Mars in the Pisces by that energy, because we have to look at the symbolism of Mars in its instincts, but it's also how it flows within the creative material. And so it'll be interesting where she took the character, how she brought that character to life, and what then that amplifies for the release, because there might be high expectation going in, or where that goes from the audience, say in Europe versus say the audience in North America, and that kind of thing. I'm curious to how that might be. The amplification of all the water energy for the production is very interesting, because this to me is about the very strong imagination and how it's, played. So that's really interesting. And I have a feeling that this is a big year. She's doing a couple, there's two pieces. We've got the Faraway Tree, which is a big production, and then the animated movie that she's behind. She's animating by voice a particular character in an animation. I think it's called The Goat, where those are children audiences mostly. But I think people who are fans of Nicola will also enter into that, and they'll be, receiving, what they enjoy about watching her do the art, right? So that'll be interesting to see as well. Okay. Well, another piece we can see, this is her North Node in Aries, so how she communicates, what she brings to the screen with the communication. That is something, one of her trademarks, what she's known for, so I'm curious how she found the voice for the character. And this might be something that shows up in the press that she does, the promo for the Faraway Tree. So they might language that. So I'm curious to see how that comes out. The midheaven, I mean, look how strong that midheaven. If they launch and release that somewhere near noon, you have the midheaven with the sun. That's a very powerful combination. So, but you also have these guys. So there could be something that's very pioneering and brand new that was done in that production. So that could be because you have the Saturn and the Neptune so close. But again, I don't think the release time of the premiere on March 27th would necessarily be at noon. It'll probably be later in the day, and so that will move the midheaven to a different point. So we will have to take a look at that in time. All right. Do I have anything else on this one? I think this is very important. Jupiter at 15 degrees is very, very important. This is a very important timeline because of the 3-eye atlas and the stationing direct, because just days before that Jupiter was stationed direct. So anything in the chart that is Jupiter related, which is all of the Sagittarius energy and all of the Pisces energy, has this forward exalted Jupiter. And so this is an interesting powerhouse of energy in the creativity and imagination of Pisces, but it also amplifies how it might go around the world with the Sagittarius. Okay, I'm sure there's more in here, but I think that's good for now. All right, I covered a lot, and I'm going to see if I have anything else. Later in the year, throughout 2026, Nicola's going to be in her fourth house annual perfection. And with that comes the importance of Venus throughout the year. And one of the most important things that Venus is going to be in its transit, it will have a retrograde later this year. So I wanted to take a look at the chart of the retrograde where it begins. And it begins at this point in Scorpio. And I want you to see it's basically right at the top of Nicola's chart. So I think this retrograde for Nicola will have something very powerful that's going to emerge, either related to the material of a part that she's playing, has a Scorpio theme to it, and then there's something that has to be might have to be revisited. There is a process here of transformation of the feminine in a powerful way, or she is diving into subject material that can be very possessive, obsessive, might have a dark undertone. Feminine energy has a shadow material that is a part of the storyline. That can be something that she's doing at that time. And this is super important as a part of that mix because it squares the Mercury. So there's multiple things here because it's about what's going on with family, what's going on with relationship, the significant other. That's why I think this is something that people will be interested to kind of observe, be an observer, and the challenge of communication, the challenge of this could be an obsessive fan, and if there's that would be a cautionary note right there. Okay. And it also is what's going on with the relationship. This is significant other, and there might be some kind of conflict or challenge that is presented between a co-star and her own career and what she embodies in some storyline, or what she deeply cares about and is passionate about, what she wants to articulate about something. If she has something that she wants to articulate, this is a very powerful energy, and it's challenging to deal with the ego of this person, okay, this co-star or this partner. That can show up, okay? Also, we have Jupiter in Leo, which is the inner child, and as having a meltdown. But it's more that it's focused on the partner, right? So that can be a challenge. Something is challenging that ego identity, and that's important to consider here. And it's the relationship, and it's touching on past relationship, past life relationship connections, because it's so close to her self node. But I think it's important that this presents a challenge, and also some sensitivity to the accessibility that people have to her. And I've brought this up before because there's such a passionate fan base. There's a very strong fan base, and we almost have Chiron about ready to enter into Taurus. So these are all lining up. It's like this moment, just this perfect moment of lineup. And this can be difficult to navigate because you have an identity and transformation. You have something going on very much in the house, the home base. There's this kind of an extra bravado ego going on with a co-star that she's managing that in some way. Or it is the partner. It's something that must be managed, and it's made bigger. It's accentuated because this is something that must be addressed. And this could be that she has to go somewhere to film something, and then what she must face in that environment, all those elements. So for example, there was a production that she was going to be doing about being a mother. I don't know if that one's been done yet or not. I don't remember that being released. I haven't seen any news on that particular story, that production, if that's going to come out, or if they've done that production, or are they in post-production? I haven't heard anything on that one. It's something about a mother and daughter, and she's going to go save her daughter from something kind of Middle East storyline. I can't remember the detail on it, but that could be something that she is undertaking during that time, or that could be the material that is, maybe it's being released around that time, and then it's the subject matter that comes up again and again, and then she's talking about those themes, right? So it can come out in different ways. So some people may think, oh, that's the person. It can layer in that the partner embodies something that is language in, say, the bravado ego, that part of the chart, and there needs to be something that's worked out related to a relationship, related to maybe even long distance relationship. But that's also the potential of her own career has the power of upsetting something over here, right? So, and then there's a wound that can happen because of she wants to be an individual, and then it's the movement from the Chiron from the individual pioneer in space, individuated, strong, embodied, powerful woman, and trying to balance also the desire for relationship. What's going on there? There's a lot going on here. So that's important at this point when the Venus goes retrograde. And it is a cycle. It goes through the retrograde from October 3rd, and then it stations to go direct, I think, November 13th in Libra, and then it makes its way back out. So that's an ongoing theme through the end of 2026, where we will see that pick up and be a challenge, or it's being laid through and in work through from what she is doing in some production work. Because you will often see that sometimes the actors will pick up a theme archetypally and it will be in their work, but it's not necessarily something that they were having to navigate on a personal level holistically, because it's getting picked up in the artwork. So I find that very fascinating when I'm looking at astrology, and it's one reason I like to study actors and actresses for what is being embodied in a particular role, how it influences or really impacts those actors in their own personal lives. Because I definitely think when you embody something that you learn something new about yourself by going to that space, going into that place to bring out that emotion and existence, to bring that character to life. I mean, that's what makes great actors, right? What they bring to the stage or they bring to the cinema, bring to the film. So I hope that this piece has been enjoyable. I'm sure that this is going to be lengthy. There are other parts that we can investigate of charts for Nicola in the coming year. I mean, I think it's wonderful to kind of have this is what we have going in at the beginning of the year perspective, but then, throughout the year, looking at quick short videos of how things are actually transpiring versus what we were looking at in terms of archetypal symbolism, because I think that's the most important thing to take a look at. We can see the potentials, but they have ways and different layers that they land in someone's experience and lived life. So I hope that this has been good. There was some background noise. I have no idea. I'm here in Dublin and I don't have a mic, so it's going through my computer. So I'm sure that you probably heard some background noises, so I apologize for that. If you are interested, I have opened the community and there'll be a link to the community Astro Sages down below. Please come join us. We just started reading the book, The Fire Element by Stephen Forrest and the Life Givers. It's great. We just started, so it's still early enough to join. I'm meeting on Saturdays with everyone in the book club, so please join. Thank you so much, and I hope this will be a video that you can enjoy and learn some insights about Nicola and how the transits and her solar return and annual perfections from her birthday give insight into the energies that she's navigating in 2026. And we like to share this from being grateful for having the insight to teach and learn something about astrology. So thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all a great rest of your week. Thank you. Bye-bye now.